Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of Said Differently. I'm your host, Jennifer Sikora. I'm an advisor for Troupe, who is the sponsor of this program. And this is the show where we tackle the topic of B2B, go-to-market storytelling, and messaging. I am excited to welcome today's guest, Scott Stransky of Thrū Content. Excited about today's topic, which is focused on content, which I've been obsessed with as a small child since I used to create stories and plays that I would torture my grandmother with. But that's not the type of content we're going to be talking about. We're going to be, really diving into the topic of storytelling and content on a persona level and really thinking about the buyer and the buyer's mindset and not maybe the old way that we used to approach content. So Scott, please introduce yourself to folks and a little bit about Thrū Content.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. My name is Scott Stransky. I'm the founder and content lead of Thrū Content, which is a boutique B2B content agency specializing in subject matter expert and customer-led content, with the goal of helping tech marketers achieve their new customer acquisition, customer expansion, and customer retention goals.
Awesome. And we got introduced to Thrū Content through Troupe and have a partnership. So we're excited to collab together. If I can use
Yeah.
collab, I feel really cool when I
Yeah.
say that.
That's what the kids all call it today.
So what the kids say. All right. Well, so in our planning for this episode, Scott, we were really talking about, the origin story for Thrū Content
Yeah.
and, the fact that, you know, we've all been buyers. You've bought
Mhm.
things, I've bought things in terms of other B2B technology products. And, there's often buying committees. There's sometimes not a sole decision maker, and members of those decision trees aren't always in the same place of readiness and awareness. And
Mhm.
so, kind of the old approach, we've all been programmed to think about is this sort of linear sales cycle, this linear sales funnel. And that's been really hard coded into the way CRMs are built and sales forecasting. That's the way those tools structure and think about things. But the reality is, especially as I looked on in my LinkedIn feed, more and more people are coming to terms with, yeah, that's actually not the way it works, right? Things are really more amorphous and they're more, loose. I don't want to say loose, but there's it's not linear. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But we're not going to be able to get away from having to have metrics that say, well, where are we in the sales cycle? And, because we still have to have reporting metrics. So when we think about content and the context of all of that, what
Mhm.
what do you think about in terms of your role and Thrū Content and the way you guys approach that from a content development standpoint with this
Yeah.
dynamic? Yeah.
So the funny part about all of this is that we're no longer what I would consider funnel-based marketers, even though the business used to be called full funnel content. And at some point in the last couple of years, it dawned on me that
Hmm.
this structure of awareness, consideration, action, and advocacy, the conventional marketing funnel, just didn't really align with how people actually act and react in a situation where they need to do something. Um, for me, I started a number of years ago with my gym, actually thinking through the psychology of how people change behaviors.
Yeah.
And what occurred to me recently, and I say recently, like in the last couple of years, is that the way people buy expensive things, software, consulting services, so on and so forth, is kind of the same way that they act when they're looking to make a behavioral change for their health. They want to quit
Oh.
smoking, they want to lose weight, they want to eat better, exercise, whatever the case may be. And so fundamentally, buying something is not a series, or the buyer journey, if you will, is not a series of click actions and attributable actions, but rather a series of small behavioral changes made over the course of time.
Yes. Yes.
And so when you drill down into that from a content perspective, you start to realize that this idea of awareness, consideration, and action just sort of breaks down because it's just not the way people move through a decision, especially one that is as complex or as expensive as buying software. So our philosophy has evolved away from funnel-based marketing and more toward a buyer enablement philosophy.
Nice.
And in order to do that, we had to align, or we have to align the structure of the content that we're putting together with the structure of how a decision is made.
Yeah.
For our purposes, that means breaking it down by stages of readiness, psychological readiness for a behavior change.
Hmm.
And what I mean by that is when you look at the conventional funnel with this awareness stage, a lot of marketers will talk about how somebody is problem unaware or solution unaware. For my money, in at least in the B2B space, problem unaware does not exist by and large. Maybe there's an exception here and there, but by and large, it doesn't exist. Because the people that you're marketing to or that you're selling to, they've been in their seats for years, maybe
They're living
decades.
it. Yes.
Yeah, they've lived it. They've lived this. They know about brands just from what they've heard in the background or taken in the background. They understand certain concepts simply by existing in the ecosystem. So this idea that we have to suddenly educate them on a problem that they didn't know that they have, I think misses the mark. A better place to start is with this idea of not being ready or considering making a change at all, i.e., purchasing. They're married to their status quo.
Yes, that's so true. Yeah, it's yes, yes, that's right. Because they've
And
developed workarounds and they've developed tolerance for it. And yeah,
exactly. And
right.
so when you look at it through a behavioral change framework, the one that we prefer is what's called the trans theoretical model of behavior change.
Oh, that sounds super fancy. Okay.
It's super nerdy. You can just look it up and it obviously
Trans
usually abbreviated
theoretical, say that again.
TTM,
TTM.
trans theoretical model of behavior change.
Okay.
So it was originally created to help people overcome addiction. And it's got
Okay.
5 or 6 stages depending on who you ask. But again, looking into it, when you understand what these stages of change are, you can draw a direct correlation to how people make decisions about buying things. So
Yeah.
the first stage there, in that model, they call it pre-contemplation, meaning simply, I'm not thinking about making a change. In the B2B world, we would consider that status quo. I'm not
That's
thinking
right.
about buying your stuff because I'm reluctant to change because change sucks. I'm rebelling against somebody outside telling me how to do my job. I'm rationalizing the fact that we've always done it this way and it's gotten us this far.
Yes. And that's
Or
where I would have flagged the opportunity as being lost to do nothing. Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
And there's also resignation that this is just the cost of doing business. Yes, it
Uh,
sucks, but this
yeah.
is this is just the nature of business. So when you start breaking down buying behaviors at this granular psychological level, it becomes a lot easier to understand the types of content that you need to be producing. And then further, taking it one step further, understanding, as you mentioned earlier, that in B2B buying, it's not one person. It's a buying group or a buying committee. And that might be, 2 or 3 people in a smaller organization. It might be 27 people in a larger organization. And each one of those people, each one of their roles has different motivations, a different
Yeah.
agenda, different objectives, different prejudices and biases from their previous experience. We need to be able to take into account the role that we want to target with our message and their stage of readiness for receiving our message. And
Mhm.
that formulates our general philosophy around creating content is role-based personalization at scale done through a lens of psychological behavior, psychological readiness for behavior change.
Yeah, this is really fascinating and I it's making me wonder how this would exist in in the framework that we're all forced to operate in right now,
Mhm.
which is these let's define very clear-cut sales stages that a deal is moving through when you have this dynamic with these different buyer personas that are involved in the decision that are at different stages of readiness. So how do you kind of shore that up, or do you leave that problem for someone else to solve, which is how do we determine where the deal is in at the deal itself, right? When
Yeah,
we're also operating from a content standpoint and a messaging standpoint on more of a persona based or buyer oriented approach, right? So,
Yeah, the status of a deal we do leave up to our clients because they're the ones overseeing the sellers. They have all the information in their CRM that we don't have access to.
mhm.
What I can tell you though is that these stages of change actually do map reasonably well to the existing funnel. So it's not like you have to, completely tear it down and start from scratch.
Okay, well, that's good news.
Right. So with your first two stages of readiness for change, it kind of loosely maps to the right now the awareness stage and maybe the consideration stage.
Yeah.
But where one of the questions I get often about this is if we're looking at shifting models, how do I measure that? Because measurement is obvious, this is the bane of every marketer's existence is attribution, right? How do I prove that what we're doing is generating leads, it's
Right.
generating MQLs, all
Yep.
this stuff.
Yep.
The the way if you think about it through the psychological framework, you can still measure what's happening just in a slightly different context. So rather than measuring click actions and or specific clicks and assuming intent from that, what you can do instead is start tagging your content. You develop your content within within these 5 or 6 stages of behavioral readiness, right? And you tag each asset in each stage, right? So if you're creating some content to move somebody off the status quo, maybe it's a micro customer story. It's just a video of a CIO who wasn't considering making a change, talking about the aha moment that made them realize, hey, we've got a problem that's probably worth solving. Let me at least think about it. Right? That's a monumental shift
Yeah.
from I'm not thinking about it to okay, I'll at least consider it.
Sure. Yeah.
In my opinion, that's the most critical juncture of any sales cycle.
Yes.
So as marketers, we can observe that, right? We can create content aimed at that specific phase of the
Yes.
buying decision for each role. And we can tag our content for pre-contemplation or status quo or whatever
Yeah.
you want to call it.
Right.
And then the next phase or the next stage is contemplation or reevaluation, as we would call it.
Mhm.
So within those two stages, you can now see as a marketer when content like the content consumption density, how many accounts, how many people are consuming content in this pre-contemplation stage or in the status quo stage, you can see when that starts moving toward the next stage, the
The next
reevaluation
stage.
or the contemplation stage. But you need to wait because in this case, usually marketers will go, oh, well, they're moving forward. They're almost an MQL. They're going to get an extra 10 points
Mhm.
if they just download one more ebook. Now they're an MQL. Cool, and we'll send them off to sales. But
Yeah.
what happens is that the way people think, the way people operate, the funnel doesn't allow for backward movement, whereas the stages
True.
of readiness
Yeah.
does. So when you see that people are consuming this status quo content, then you see that there's some movement in the reevaluation content. You want to wait for that density in the next phase to pick up because they can always backslide and go back a stage or even two. In this case, you can't go any further than the very beginning. Anyway,
Yeah.
all that's to say is that if you're intent on measuring content consumption density and velocity, how quickly people you see that change between one stage to the next. Now you can still measure the velocity and the momentum of your marketing campaigns and your marketing efforts along the same lines or using very similar terminology to what you would do within the funnel, but now you actually have a behavioral framework behind it
Right.
rather than just some arbitrary numbers that somebody's made up.
I love the idea of tagging the content with these t different types of attributes, and this is where Troupe and Through Content's approaches really complement quite well because we're looking at not just your content but all your messaging and messages that are being delivered through all your interactions as well. And we're looking at where that density is, like which messages are showing up when something is moving from one stage to a next. And that can actually inspire then content ideas. It's like, well, okay, we're
Absolutely.
seeing these messages are actually more present than not when a deal moves from this stage to this, so that we really should bulk up some content around those themes, right? So that works really well too.
Yeah, any signaling that you can do that gives you an idea of what content to create next, I think is maybe a better option or a better action to take than just simply assuming intent.
Yeah. Speaking of, kind of transitioning to another topic we discussed in prep for this, um, a particular category of content that marketers have been very obsessed with, and sales teams as well, is ROI based content. And
Mhm.
how do you capture the value and deliver a story about the value that you're providing to your customers? And as a content person and a product marketer and then as a marketing leader, I would get a lot of pressure and demand, rightfully so, from the sales organizations that said, like, help me really justify the value of the price tag we're putting on this by capturing these customer ROI metrics. You have an interesting, thought around this in terms of, you know, do we do most people glaze over when they read other people's ROI metrics, or how do you do it right? How do you do it well?
I think ROI metrics are table stakes. I also don't think that they're really impactful for moving deals forward.
Mm,
Because at least speaking from the tech marketing space, by and large, the technology that these companies, these buyers are evaluating does the same stuff, right? There's a feature and a nuance here, a feature and a nuance there. And so, but usually they're kind of the same thing. So when one vendor comes out and says, "Hey, we delivered 37% ROI," the next vendor is going to come out and say, "Well, we did 41%."
yeah, it
And
reminds me of
so
that movie, There's Something About Mary, for those who've seen it. There's the scene where he picks up the hitchhiker, and the hitchhiker is saying, "Oh, I have this idea for a video called 8 Minute Abs," right? Like a workout video. And Ben Stiller's character is like, "Well, what happens if somebody comes up with 7 minute abs?" So,
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. And the so at that point you're basically in an arms race just to get some numbers out there. And the thing that I think people generally misunderstand or mistake about buying behaviors. And granted, I'm not a clinical psychologist, I'm not, any sort of superstar expert on this, but people who are have studied this. You think about somebody like Daniel Kahneman with the thinking fast, thinking slow,
Mm,
that you've got these two systems of thinking, the kind of emotional knee-jerk reaction one, and then the more logical one. But we know from studies, we know from research that people don't buy, they don't act rationally. They don't act on logic. They act on emotion and then support that with logic. So in the context of content and storytelling, yeah, it's important that you have these ROI metrics just to prove competence, that it proves that what you say on your website is what you do in practice. But really the way that people can stand out or brands can stand out, and the way that you move and connect with buyers to move them forward is through the experience.
yeah.
The experience is the differentiator when all the technology is basically the same, when all the messaging is basically the same, and the ROI is all basically the same. The thing that can help you stand out is getting people to understand what it is like to be your customer from pre-sales all the way through post-deployment support.
Yeah.
Those intricacies, how does this work in my business, in my team, in my reality? What happens when X, Y, and Z goes wrong, because we know it's going to. We're not living in with rose-colored glasses on. They're asking these questions about vendor reliability, vendor follow through, more so than how much, what's your ROI? How much can we cut off the top line? How much expenses can we reduce? So yeah, the ROI numbers are important, they're table stakes, but really it's that customer experience that is the differentiator, and that's what makes for better storytelling.
Yeah, I think you've nailed it. I mean, people want to hear. It's interesting because, everyone's always often focused on quant, right? Like
Yep.
quantify it. But what we are humans still buying from humans, at least as of this moment, we still are. Um, that's still how it's happening. AI isn't buying from AI, although maybe that day will come.
Sooner or later.
Um, so we're still emotional creatures and we still react to how other people are sharing their experience. And it reminds me a bit of what you were saying. I took a couple years break from my B2B tech career to join a nonprofit focused in the mental health space. And we would give our educational talks, and then at the end, we had time to share our personal experiences.
Mhm.
And that was always the part of the presentation that got the highest reviews, right? Was that personal story. And so I think that's true in B2B tech as well, is the personal experiences that are shared.
And it has to be, in my opinion, it should be role based. It should be one to one, like for like. People want to hear stories and experiences, even negative ones, from
Yeah.
people who look like them, sound like them, act like them, work like them, have faced similar situations day in and day out. It
Yes.
doesn't make a lot of sense to tell a story from the CIO's perspective if you're aiming it at somebody in procurement because they fundamentally just don't care about the same things.
And they don't speak
So
necessarily the same language either.
no, they really don't. They don't speak the same way. They don't think the same way. They're not measured the same way. They're not prioritizing things the same way. And
Yeah.
so I think marketing from the promotions perspective, when we're talking about go to market and content it falls in that promotions category. I think we've done ourselves a real disservice by trying to blanket our content or create content for the buyer without recognizing that the buyer is not one person. It's a bunch of people who care about different things at different times for different reasons.
Yeah. Well, and I think the last topic I wanted to cover with you, kind of again carrying over what we were just discussing, is a lot of people are turning to AI to help them generate content, and
Mhm.
which, great, wonderful. It helps speed and facilitate this, but it's also not the end all be all, in my opinion. Um, how can AI help with this persona based aspect, right? I mean, we all know how AI can help generate some generic content, but
Yeah.
persona-based tailoring, does it do a good job? And or how can you help it do a good job for you so then you're taking it the way I see it, AI can help get you started, but you still
Yeah.
have to take it. I don't even want to say the last mile. I usually
Yeah.
say depending on the what's produced, I still have to put anywhere from 40 to 70% more work into it to get it across the finish line. But
Absolutely.
but at least it gives you a starting point. But how would you recommend people approach using AI to help with the persona-based buyer mindset of content?
Yeah, it's a good question because I've explored it pretty extensively over the last couple of years. So real quick backstory. A few years ago, we had a client who wanted a white paper, and we've written tons of white papers. This is like our bread and butter. And
Yep.
when I asked them who it was for, they gave me like five or six different
Oh.
personas or roles, and I was like, okay, we'll
Ooh.
do it, but I don't think it's going to work. But okay, whatever. And the work was fine. It was good. We did the project, and it didn't actually go anywhere. They published it, and I don't think anything happened with it.
Hmm.
And that was the moment that kind of sent me down this rabbit hole of, oh, okay, well, this is actually how AI should be used. Is how do we take a piece of content that we wrote for one persona or role and repurpose it using the same core
Yeah.
logic for
Right.
other roles, but speaking their language. So I started using just different AI tools, different canvases, trying to create some workflows that would translate this and translate that and do some research on psychological frameworks and so on and so forth. Fast forward to now, my team and I have built what we're calling a role and readiness matrix,
Nice.
or it's an engine. It's a role and readiness engine. So we've trained the AI. So it's an agentic, it's a RAG architecture, it's agentic AI, and we've modeled it to after trans-theoretical model of behavior change and a couple of other behavioral frameworks. And what it does now is we input simply the vendor, like who we are, what we're trying to sell, to what role in the buying group, in what vertical or what market.
Yep.
And the way that we've set up the architecture is it does a look back. It makes a best guess based on these behavioral frameworks and publicly known knowledge about a CIO's role or CTO's role or whatever the role is, and it combines those into this stage and then each stage following. So basically what it spits out is what we call a role and readiness action map. And it
Okay.
tells you for this role in this stage of readiness, you need to deliver this message for this reason in this form, likely in this format. And
Hmm.
it runs through each role in your buying group through each of their stages of change. So you can, when you look into it, you can see there are some marked differences that even if you want to talk about this, whatever your value prop is, this one, maybe it's a product or a service
Yeah.
that you sell, you can see from the beginning, before you write a single piece of a single sentence, you can see that the message in the C-suite is markedly different than it is in procurement or business analyst or in sales or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it does a great job of, like you said, putting you on the right path to start understanding and getting in the mindset of each of the different roles that you want or need to influence, understanding also that they're not going to move in sync. That the CFO might not even know about something until it hits her desk,
Right.
but the daily operator, the senior manager or whatever, is they're sold on it. They're ready to sign on the dotted line. They're ready for that SOW to come through. So they're in different stages, and you need to be able to match that. So that's what this role and readiness action map does. I
Okay.
don't know that you need to build that yourself, but you can reasonably use your favorite AI tool to accomplish something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
With the right prompts and the right understanding of what behavioral frameworks make the most sense to you. Use your AI best friend, your ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or whomever it is,
Yes.
um, and go through that exact exercise. I'm selling this to this person in this role. This is my business. I want to know what at every stage of readiness for behavior change, for readiness for purchase, what they might be thinking or what questions and comments and concerns and objections they might have that we need to proactively address via content.
I love it. Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, I think it's and this stuff is only going to get better over time too, so it's just going to get more and more exciting. I don't know. I'm personally excited about using AI as a helper
Yep.
because I feel like it's just going to accelerate and advance what we can accomplish beyond what we used to. So I don't know. I'm sort of geeked out about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's going to be it's a force multiplier, but it shouldn't be a
Totally.
replacement.
That's a
And I
great way
think
to put it. Yeah.
and I think a lot of leaders, maybe not necessarily marketing leaders, but financial purse string leaders, when
Mm,
they're looking at budgets versus versus goals and whatnot. I think it's easy for them to fall into the mindset or fall into the trap of, well, AI can do this, so let's just replace our marketing team. Let's replace our writers. And it's just not, it's a force multiplier, not a replacement for human talent.
yeah, for sure. So let's wrap on a final
Okay.
question. Um, I don't know how I would answer this, but I would try. But what is your favorite type of content to work on these days?
My background is as a customer advocacy marketer. So customer storytelling has been, is, and probably always will be my favorite kind of content.
Yeah.
I'm not I'm no longer a big believer in the big transformational case studies and even the narrative style ones, right? My business sucked, then I met Jennifer, and now everything's awesome. Great. Another table stakes type of message goes up on the website, proves
Hmm.
competence. What I
Okay.
love doing is telling micro stories, is interviewing different people in a buying group in different situations and understanding at a human level what this meant for them, what this transformation meant not only for them personally in their
Yeah.
day-to-day experience as an employee, but also their home life, their relationships with their coworkers, what it meant for their team, as well as, of course, what did it mean for the business. And I think when you humanize the stories like that to that degree of granularity, that's when you start getting resonance. That's when the message lands with your intended audience because it's no longer a here, let me show you how it's done. It's now I have this person who looks, sounds, acts, and works like me, kind of guiding me through how this, what this experience is going to be if I choose to work with this company. And you want that, you want somebody to walk you through it, right? You want somebody who's been there, done that, to tell you in their own words, in words that you would understand, in your language, what you can expect, so you can make a rational decision. You can make a logical decision at that point.
I love that. Okay. I think that's wonderful. Great storytelling approach. And I'm excited to have Troupe partner with Thrū Content and looking at what we're going to be able to do together for clients. And I really like the way you guys are approaching the market with your content philosophy, and hope that those who are need some more, support with content development and strategy, check you guys out. So, yeah.
Thanks so much.
Yeah,
I'm
thanks.
looking forward to it also. I think we have based on what Troop does and what we do, I think it's a match made in heaven. Because one final note, if we can, just kind of
Yeah.
wrapping up, circling back to that AI conversation. AI has democratized content creation. Now anybody and their sister can create content. It's
Yes.
easy.
Yeah.
But creating content that matters and creating content that actually relates and resonates with audiences is much more difficult. So the fact that Troop is available to help measure what's actually out in the wild and whether or not
So
it's
true.
working
Yeah.
is part of a closed loop feedback, or a closed feedback loop for us, that we can see what's working, what's not, and do more of, or at least investigate what's working and why, so that we can do more of that and have more, I guess, pinpoint or focused effort and resource allocation instead of just creating a bunch of content and hoping it sticks.
Yes, I love that. In fact, I presented to a group of folks yesterday and I got the question of, well, what do I do as a marketer about all of this content that's getting created across all my teams and I can't get my arms around it? It's like, well, okay, that's a, kind of a policing issue, but sometimes you want to see how that content is performing in the wild, as you said, Scott. Is it effective? Because you might not want to clamp down on content that is effective, right? And sometimes you can't always predict what's going to be effective. Well, you should be able to predict,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
sometimes if
yeah,
you don't see it and you don't know it's there and it's effective, you want to know that, and so that you can fold it into your core content strategy. So
yeah, absolutely.
I love it. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. And thanks everyone for listening.
Thanks for having me. See
Bye.
you soon. Bye.